That's right, it would appear that Biden's Build Back Better bill is not looking so likely. I'm sure you're all aware of this and know all of the issues as to why. So rather than repeat what you already know, I thought we could just talk about the economic consequences of no EV rebate. Of course, we'll just discuss the EV rebate side of the bill and as to the impact it will have with the EV industry and Tesla. We recently heard Elon talking about how he didn't want this bill to pass in the first place at the Wall Street Journal CEO Summit. The reason being, government have shown such a poor ability of asset allocation. Now, Tesla did not need this bill in any way to succeed. It was designed entirely for the legacy autos who are struggling so much with the EV side of their business. Although Tesla would have succeeded with or without the bill, Tesla was also the one to benefit the most from the EV rebate, by which I mean it would have been Tesla customers receiving the majority of the EV rebate. No one else can make as many EVs as Tesla. It was going to be a numbers game. Whoever can make the most EVs will receive the most rebates. Despite the US legacy autos receiving over 50% more in rebates per vehicle, it was still going to always be about quantity. Given that Tesla sells twice as many EVs in the US as everyone else combined, the vehicles with the most rebates were always going to be Teslas. But this rebate goes directly to the consumer, which means the vehicles become lower cost and thus simply increases demand. But that in no way helps Tesla make or sell more cars. All it was going to do was increase an already very long waiting list to something crazy. It would have meant that Tesla likely raised their prices about perhaps $4,000 per vehicle too, essentially taking a cut of the rebate that is meant for consumers, just to keep a control on demand. If that was the case, then Tesla stood to benefit an additional $4 billion gross profit per million vehicles sold in the US. And this is how Tesla would have benefited from the EV rebate. But that was only if Tesla did decide to raise their prices. The rebate was going to drive their demand crazy. It makes it more difficult to run business with such extreme government intervention. It's one thing trying to get pricing and supply correct with natural market demand, but government subsidies complicate the natural flow of business and competitiveness. Tesla will likely be profiting over $20,000 per Model Y that is sold in Texas anyway, at least gross profit, so an additional $4,000 per vehicle is not the make or break for Tesla. However, the competition, or US legacy autos I should say, well, their rebate was going to be significantly higher, which meant they could have possibly raised their prices higher. And as they lose money per sale, this would possibly take them to break even. But for legacy autos, there is still a dynamic price at the point of sale with the car dealer. The car dealers can choose to change the price of any vehicle they sell to the end user to take advantage of any extra demand. Car dealers would have likely ordered the next 6 months or more of wholesale autos, meaning there'd be a long waiting list of legacy auto EVs too. Considering we're hearing some Ford dealers raising the prices of marquees as high as $15,000 extra on the stock price, and this is when the subsidy is only $7,500. Well, imagine what would happen if the subsidy was $12,500. I think the car dealers would have absorbed a lot of that profit for themselves. And legacy autos won't be able to make enough EVs fast enough to cover the demand. Therefore, the taxpayer wouldn't have likely saved much on their new EV anyway, not to mention all that extra government spending that someone else has to pay for. The real good news out of this is that it also means no plug-in hybrid rebates either. The issue I have with this is that it's not the future of transport. It doesn't need more funds invested. We know what the future is. It's all electric. We don't want to encourage the wrong technologies. It was also strange to be added onto the bill, considering GM did not even offer a hybrid model, let alone a plug-in hybrid anymore. So to summarize, if the rebate went through, it was only going to mean that the consumer got a Tesla slightly cheaper, but would have had to wait significantly longer for one than they do already today. And as for legacy autos EVs, well, it in no means they can make their EVs any faster. They're already supposedly investing tens of billions of dollars into their EV growth, which means their current offering will still be scarce, resulting in more demand than there is supply if they had $12,500 rebate, which means the car dealers will just charge more. Anyway, this rebate in no way made any difference to Tesla's mission. Tesla are not constrained by cash. They also make great profits. Tesla did not need any more incentives. It just makes the auto industry a mess. This was an extreme rebate. Up to $12,500 is huge. I mean, what was going to happen if the US was selling 5 million EVs a year? That is probably over $50 billion in rebates every year. Even these days, $50 billion a year is still a significant amount of money. I don't think this bill was entirely thought through, or they simply underestimated the level of capacity that Tesla could reach in the US in 5 years' time. But either way, it was not a good allocation of capital. It doesn't benefit the taxpayer, and as Tesla shareholders, it doesn't benefit us overly. and it would be easier to navigate the auto industry without such distractions and complications. However, maybe they will review this bill again later, when legacy autos have finally ramped up somewhat and can actually produce somewhat of a quantity of EVs that actually do qualify for a rebate. Maybe it's all just a bit premature. Although legacy autos lose money on their EVs currently, they still don't make a great quantity. Perhaps they're trying to time it better when they do have more supply. Although they need to bear in mind that Tesla will have exponentially more supply too. But maybe they simply underestimate Tesla because they're simply unbelievable. Or maybe they just need to rethink of a better way of how legacy autos can benefit without helping Tesla, which does prove to be difficult. Ford will eventually exhaust their $7,500 rebate in the US if they sell enough EVs, which will then make the Mach-E much more expensive against the Model Y, although that may not be for some time. If the EV rebate was also meant as an advantage against the Chinese EVs, as it had been mentioned that Chinese EVs were not eligible to receive the rebate, then this also gives the Chinese EVs a more even playing field in the US. Although to enter the US and other markets, the Chinese will have import tariffs, and when margins are so slim or non-existent with EVs, any additional costs can impact profits. The Build Back Better bill was actually separate to the charging network subsidies. That was in the infrastructure bill, which actually did pass. With Biden's infrastructure bill, there is $7.5 billion allocated for EV charging, with a target of 500,000 superchargers in the US, which would be an average of $15,000 subsidy per charger. But I don't think we have enough information yet on how this will all work, and I believe a single supercharger costs a lot more than $15,000. Elon was also opposed to the infrastructure bill too, basically thinking governments just have far too much debt already. I would have thought that Tesla are putting up as many superchargers as they possibly can anyway. Elon said they plan on tripling the number of superchargers over the next 2 years. I think this is a very underrated statement. I actually was expecting this bill to pass. I had bought options in the chance that this event did occur, as I think it would have been good for the stock price. We're at a place with Tesla where there are several rather major events about to occur, like the EV rebate, new factories opening, 4680 production lines, potential 50% in EPS quarter over quarter, record deliveries, just to name a few. Sometimes Tesla has a lot of major events in a short period of time. It doesn't happen often, but last year was similar. We had the stock split, battery day, and the S&P inclusion. When this happens, I generally like to wait for a dip and buy some options to cover these events. Anyway, I have a fair amount riding on where this company will be by about February, as long as the economy remains intact, and hopefully we get these new factories open sometime soon. Anyway, remember, building an EV company takes a really long time. Next year is going to be an important year in order to get Tesla up to the next stage in their game. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.